I've been growing organic veg, started in 1996. We did 20 acres of just mixed stuff, did a box scheme initially. Started going to farmers market in Bath at some point. I have no idea the dates of any of this at all, it was a long time ago. We stayed there, 20% increase year on year for quite a while, and then 2012 happened and it was the wettest summer, it rained all summer. I didn't handle it very well in the end. We were 30% down in takings, so actually probably among the best. I know Ian Tolhurst had a really shit year. He made everyone aware of his rainfall, which was actually our average rainfall, so I didn't feel too bad about what he was dealing with over there. After that, we carried on supplying in farmers market for another year. I reduced down what we were growing here, started doing a bit of wholesale. I retrained as an electrician, so I do a bit of that now and then, but I don't have time for it now. I've started doing mushrooms, which we began probably about 3.5 years ago. Because I wasn't using the land, we were approached by Tom Baxter to start using it, which I agreed with, because I just felt that it was probably the right idea to start using the ground. He grew a bit of wholesale, played around at it, and then about a year later, it's disgusting. The straw is a really horrible way of doing it. It stinks. We were pasteurising, cold pasteurising rather than hot pasteurising, so it sat in a barrel of water for 2 weeks, where all the anaerobic, aerobic, whatever, which way round, the stuff that gets killed off in water dies, and then you tip it out and all the stuff that gets killed off in air dies, and then you inoculate it with spawn, which we did in plastic boxes, and grew oyster mushrooms that way, which is hard. It's a very hard way of doing it. You get a lot of fly problems because they absolutely love the straw, so they multiply their masses. We then spoke to some guys down in Devon who do loads of mushrooms. They grow all sorts, but they were getting it in from this Dutch company called CNC Mushrooms. They were buying in all the blocks ready to fruit, and we got involved with that. We started buying in hundreds of blocks and fruiting them and selling them into local restaurants. We started Bath Farmers Market because I had an inroad into that, so we just thought we'd go for it again. And I did that for a while. Then COVID happened, all the restaurants stopped, so we're still growing loads of mushrooms, but trying to do this. Let yours run around.
Because you'll run off. I'll get out again in a minute.
Close the gate. Right. And it became sort of obvious as well that we weren't going to work well together. We've got very different business minds, ways we do business. So he's much more interested in making shitloads of money out of it all and being a global dominating. You've seen how small car parking area we've got here, and there were dozens of cars coming in every single day from volunteers, lots of random people. So he's now moved up to Barragurney, where he's set up in Bristol Fungarium, who do tinctures is their main one. They do a lot of lion's mane and things along those lines. I get on alright with them. I grow mushrooms for them, and I sell their product as well. And I just decided to stay small. I supply farmers market in Bath and hopefully a bit of wholesale in the near future, and just grow a big range of mushrooms right through from making the liquid spawn, going out picking wild mushrooms and cloning them, buying in liquid cultures as well, and then bulking that out, sterilising and inoculating bags, and just slowly improving my knowledge. So I've been doing it solo for probably 1.5 years now. Initially I did buy in some blocks to fruit, but the quality of that has just been declining massively. The Dutch company had huge problems with COVID and lack of staff, so they were getting issues with contamination, which I've had plenty of issues with that. If you want to get into growing mushrooms, it's a long process between starting doing it and then actually getting better and better. There's so many horrible green bags that you get in the actual learning process. So if anyone's thinking of doing it, I'd say don't. Or buy in some blocks to get you started, but it have to be things like shiitake where you can actually get a really good return. The Dutch blocks I think were costing over £5 each, and to get £5 worth of mushrooms out of these things consistently was hard work. Shiitake, normally you can get sort of 10, 15 off of them if they fruit well, but for every block that fails out of the ones you bought in, you just see you're spending a lot of money for not a lot. That's me, right.
Is it still easy to get the blocks?
Sorry. From Europe,
Yeah.
there's phytosanitary certificates I think coming in and things like that as well. So I don't know. I'm not doing it. There's a French company who do straw-based, very very good. So those would be the ones that I would recommend getting, because you get a much higher yield off of the straw than the sawdust ones. Just oyster mushrooms and shiitake seem to break it down quicker and make use of it, whereas sawdust, I find that even if I'm fruiting sort of 4 or 5 times, I'm still getting all the goodness out of it. So when I throw them out in the field, there's mushrooms growing out there. But
the blocks you're talking about, do they come already inoculated with a different type of mushroom?
the ones from abroad, yeah. There's a few guys who do it in the UK as well. There's some guys over in Wales, but I haven't really chased up.
Can you do it yourself?
I do it all. I do everything myself. Yeah. That's the price of that is therefore much cheaper. It costs money to sterilise, but it's cheaper than buying this stuff in. That's good. Right. Anyway, we were going to have an intro, weren't we? I just got carried away. Sorry, Kate.
That's great.
Let's go around. Hard to get that consistent yield, so you get your logs and they fruit for a short period, and then they're redundant. So I chatted with someone at the weekend who is doing just that, but they've got in 1,000 odd logs and they spent September inoculating them, but they're obviously not going to be fruiting until next year. So it's just, I try and get every single Saturday I've got stuff to sell. Whereas logs,
what happens to the logs after they've finished fruiting? What do they do with the?
well, they rot down. Yeah, they rot down. They're fantastic. It takes a nice long time. So it's doing the.
You think you'll get if you're on that scale? You're just going to have
Yeah,
A lot of logs.
quite a lot of logs mounting up.
Yeah, definitely. But they break down into such a small amount over time. And if you've got a bit of woodland, then it's perfect. You just stack them up, you fruit them, and then it collapses down. You do another little batch. So long as you've got native species, you're not really interfering with things. If you're using non-native species, then it's part of what I feel here actually is that I have a lot of non-native species and the spores are getting out there. Over in America there's the yellow oyster, which started off on the, whichever side we are, east coast I think, and has moved halfway across America now as an invasive species. It's not like honey fungus, it doesn't destroy everything, but it is going to be competing with native things. So it's considered a native species now, I think, just because it's there. I do just the farmers market in Bath. That's all I'm doing at the moment. Yeah, and it's making me enough. The business is making money. I'm not particularly, but the business is paying all its bills and got a surplus, so I've got money to reinvest, and I do a bit of electrical work now and then to top things up, but I try not to. And a few other bits. Sorry, anyway, it's hard to get that consistent yield, so you get your logs and they fruit for a short period, and then they're redundant. So I chatted with someone at the weekend who is doing just that, but they've got in 1,000 odd logs and they spent September inoculating them, but they're obviously not going to be fruiting until next year. So it's just, I try and get every single Saturday I've got stuff to sell. Whereas logs,
What happens to the logs after they've finished fruiting? What do they do with the?
Well, they rot down. Yeah, they rot down. They're fantastic. It takes a nice long time. So it's doing the.
You think you'll get if you're on that scale? You're just going to have
Yeah.
a lot of logs. Quite a lot of logs mounting up.
Yeah, definitely. But they break down into such a small amount over time. And if you've got a bit of woodland, then it's perfect. You just stack them up, you fruit them, and then it collapses down. You do another little batch. So long as you've got native species, you're not really interfering with things. If you're using non-native species, then it's part of what I feel here actually is that I have a lot of non-native species and the spores are getting out there. Over in America there's the yellow oyster, which started off on the whichever side we are, east coast I think, and has moved halfway across America now as an invasive species. It's not like honey fungus, it doesn't destroy everything, but it is going to be competing with native things. So it's considered a native species now, I think, just because it's there. I do just the farmers market in Bath. That's all I'm doing at the moment. Yeah, and it's making me enough. The business is making money. I'm not particularly, but the business is paying all its bills and got a surplus, so I've got money to reinvest, and I do a bit of electrical work now and then to top things up. But I try not to. And a few other bits. Sorry. Anyway, they didn't colonise fully. Ideally, they should look like this all over them. So this brown, this darker brown, slightly popcorned, but a lot of them have just not fully done their thing. So there's a huge swathes of them that aren't going to fruit. This one at the back here, there's nothing on that. I'll get a few mushrooms off it. So I've now got an air conditioner in the incubation room to try and bring it down to about 25 degrees, which is optimum for colonisation. Ideally, I'd be getting sort of 20-25 kilos of shiitake a week. I'm probably getting about 10-15 at the moment, which is what it is. It's learning.
What's the substrate for that?
These I use oak, which I get from just down the road. They do oak frame buildings, so I get their waste. The rest of the stuff I use beech, and beech is impossible to get in the UK. So I buy in pure beech fuel bricks, which I break up and make into these. I've been down so many routes trying to find beech, but it's not there. The other option is to get a big mill and make my own, but everything's three-phase, which is powerful. I have to break logs of wood down. So at the moment I use imported fuel logs, which is that and the plastic are the two things which I don't feel organic. To be really honest, it's a difficult one.
Can you reuse the bags? Sorry.
The bag, no. It's single-use plastic. I get 3 picks off of them, so it's not single-use plastic, but it is single-use plastic. There's research going on into degradable ones. There is a brand of degradable which is available now, but it's degradable. It's not biodegradable, so it still breaks down into plastic, just smaller bits of plastic.
Wool?
It's got to go through the sterilisation process, and it's got to keep the things inside sterile for potentially things like these. It's 3 or 4 months. So anything which breaks down quickly or anything like that. But from a substrate point of view, there are other things. Straw is a fantastic option. I tried getting organic straw. It's really hard. And also then it has to be processed down into something really fine in order to get the right amount of weight in there. There's cardboard. You can grow oyster mushrooms on almost any matter. Coffee is a big one. A lot of people use that now.
Oysters there? Sorry, the yellow one.
The yellow ones are oysters, the greys are oysters, the pinks are oysters. So oyster is the bulk of what I grow.
And the free spongy
The
ones.
fun things at the back, which no one's actually had a chance to look at because I hid them.
Sorry.
These. So we've got lion's mane.
Nice.
Is that the super pretty one?
The super frilly one is called Phelim coralloides, which is a relation to lion's mane, but is coral tooth, as its common name. Let's get a lion's mane.
Oh, that's
Only because I've got fucking awesome one around here.
I'll get my camera. I'm going to put you on Insta, Phelim. Is that all right?
Yeah. There's a.
Oh, go on. Whoa!
nice.
So that's
What a beauty!
that's the one which is good for brain function. Medicinally, it's become really, really popular. It's illegal to collect it in the wild. I have 2 samples from wild strains, which I'm working with sort of trying to get more of them out in the wild as well. So if anyone has any big fallen beech logs, beech trees and things like that, it is possible to put dowels in of the native
We've done
species.
so on our farm as well, yeah.
Excellent.
So it takes about 2 years, I think, doesn't it?
I've tried some, I haven't seen any results from it yet.
How long ago was that?
A year.
Oh, right.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
They seem to get into the heartwood.
Yeah.
They're more of a internal rotter rather than external. So it does take potentially 5 years or so.
Yeah.
I've heard.
Yeah. Still worth it. Yeah, and because it's so rare, I guess hopefully it'll start spreading as a bit.
Yeah, as more gets out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got to say 2. So have you got a native one?
I think so, yeah. Yeah, I didn't actually order it, but the head gardener did, but I believe he would have ordered a native one, yeah.
I don't know if there's many out there.
Oh, right, okay. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
So find out for me, because if
Yeah.
it is, I'm trying to get samples from
Yeah, I
as
can
many
message
as
him.
possible.
Yeah.
And if it's not, I can get hold. Well, I've got 2, and I'm in the process of getting more.
All right. Yeah.
Just to try and encourage them out there.
Yeah.
Because they're massively endangered
Yeah.
in the UK. The coralloides is even more endangered. Throughout Europe, I think there's 140 of them in the wild
Right.
that have been found
Wow.
throughout Europe.
Yeah.
So massively.
Are they growing up?
They prefer beach. Most fungi prefer beach.
Right.
The only reason I use oak is because it's free for the shiitake. Otherwise, I'd use beech as well.
How come the beach is so hard to get hold of?
We don't fell beech in this country. We don't use beech for production because it's just as hard as oak, but it rots. Whereas oak has got tannins in it, which are a natural fungicide.
So for instance, you were managing a small woodland that happened to have beech trees in, and you had a Phelim license, and you locked, say, 300-year-old beech trees down. Would you have an immediate market amongst mushroom growers for beech? Like just out of
I think
asking for a friend.
yeah, I'm not sure with actually felling beech. It's sort of frowned upon in this country because there's so few of the ancient beech. If it's a sickly beech, or younger, I mean, I'd say younger beech, which are perhaps 50 years old, and then replanting, and letting them grow up would be better rather than and leave the big, massive ones.
Could you just chop a few branches off? Almost like farm it and just chop bits off every few years? Or do you need really
they take a long time to grow, so you're almost better off to get the younger ones growing. They're a slow growing species.
Which just seems such a process.
When you've got the wood, then do you check it all out and put it in a bag? Is that what you
Because of the way I get it, it's already broken up into small pieces.
So that's not
You can get a hammer mill, which is a massive bit of kit, which it's a bunch of hammers with blades on them and a mesh around it, and it spins really fast and just pulverizes the wood and only lets through things small enough to fit through the mesh. So I'd sort of want things maybe 2 millimeters in diameter to go through, so I'd have to smash logs up. There would be a massive market for beech if definitely. But from a mushroom grower's point of view, we don't have people who are breaking it up. So I suppose you'd sell logs for inoculating, ideally, probably about that sort of size. But if you wanted to stick in something like this, the bigger the better. You get a patch. You can stick something like this in while it's still alive as well. If there's a weak point on it, so a branch that's broken off, stick in 50 dowels, 100 dowels of a native lion's mane, and hopefully it will actually grow in it, and it will be a fantastic. It'll spread. In theory, it'll spread anyway. There's just not enough hosts out there for it.
Okay.
How many flushes will you get on that?
Probably 3 off of lion's mane. Each one is diminishing each time. The same with the oysters. The yellow oysters, I tend to only get one pick off them because I have to cut the top off of them.
If you did it in a bigger bag, would you like with more?
You get more, yeah.
That makes sense.
The smaller amount in there, the smaller the mushrooms, the less you get. But if you get a big bag, the sort that the straw ones I was getting were 8 kilo bags, and they produced much more in the way of mushrooms. So I think the bigger you go, the more they can actually digest it and produce. So these bags are the biggest you can get in the way of unicorn bags, but if you go onto a bigger container, so long as it's not too big, and then ideally sort of long and thin. So I have looked into sort of plastic pails and growing out the sides of them as a way of reducing plastic. So far it's only taken me more plastic because it didn't work, and I've now got plastic containers with holes in that you've got to do something with. But there's sort of...
And as a general rule, would you usually only go for 2 holes on these size bags?
I do, yeah. Sometimes maybe 1. If I use oak for things like lion's mane, then I just put 1 hole in because it takes it so much longer to break down the oak and get the goodness out of it to fruit. But it can then fruit for longer, so long as it doesn't get contaminants, which I'm going to see if I've got any green. There's some green on that one now.
So you make the hole,
I move the hole.
so you dictate where it comes out.
So that stuff there is it's a parasitic mould. Now this is the other one. I've got little flies, fungus gnats. This stuff will spread and cover the whole thing over the course of a week, 2 weeks.
Is it worth taking that out of here now?
I try to remove them as they get that sort of amount. I let a little bit slide, but the flies get in, they get around to that, and then they transfer the spores everywhere else.
Is it just like, does it just mean it kind of buggers up that bag, or is it kind of more worrying than that?
No,
It doesn't affect the mushrooms or anything.
it can grow on the mushrooms as well because it's a parasitic mould. And then the more of it there is, the more there is because it fires out loads of spores. It's more. I have issues with that in the making phase. If any of this gets into some spawn, so if I'm not quite clean enough, I get a bag of spawn which I then split between 10 bags, and all 10 of those bags can just be written off within a week. The whole bag just goes green. When it's a bag in here, I'm not too worried. That one will be removed. And the flies love. You see over the top of the yellow oyster, I've got the little traps. They absolutely love yellow. They are attracted to yellow, so a little fly in there, I believe, or maybe a bit of dirt. I don't know.
Fly,
So when do you decide to harvest it? How, I mean, size, you think, will it grow bigger or will it go over? That's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is. It's learning and also time. In the summer when it's 25 degrees, everything just grows so quick. So I have to go in every single day, sometimes twice a day, to pick things because they're double. They probably treble in size in a day in the summer. In the winter, when it is cool, these take probably 2-3 times as long. So I can relax. Those pink oysters I should have picked yesterday, but I thought I'd leave them for people to see because they look nice. If I don't pick them quite in time, things don't store as well. So it's a false economy to leave them an extra day because then they'll last 2 days less. If I pick them when they're smaller and younger, I can get things like shiitakes last 2 weeks in the fridge. Some of the oyster mushrooms a week easily. And lion's mane's the only one which is a really short life. Sometimes that's only got 2 or 3 days after picking, but it sits and stays like that. That one was ready for picking last week, but let it grow bigger.
How big could you let it grow? Would it just stop now, do you think?
It'll fall off.
Right,
So
yeah.
it'll make its own decision. Once it gets too heavy,
Yeah.
it falls off, or you get problems. There's one down here. That one's just, it starts rotting.
So the fronds get long and then...
Yeah.
That's a lion's mane, is it?
This is its, I don't know.
Final
I can't even see a date label on this one, so that's probably a year old actually, that particular bag that I've been cropping.
So you've had some cuts and now that's the last little blob.
Yeah, that one's fruited probably 3 or 4 times over time.
You make the holes on one side,
Yeah, so
start harvesting and then turn it around and start the other side?
No, I just fruit out the same hole. So that's...
But if you make 6 holes all the way around. You'll get a crop much quicker, much more, but it will die out quicker.
A lot of them will just abort. So there's a certain amount that they throw out.
Yeah.
You can see with some of these that I'll bring that around.
What are those
Yeah,
ones?
this one's Pholiota adiposa, which in the UK is not edible. In America is very much edible. Just how things have sort of gone that people decided this wasn't edible over here. There's quite a few similar ones which make you sick. So I think that's why this is not edible over here.
Have you eaten
Because
it?
it's easy. Oh, it's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fine. I think it is purely the case that it's got lookalikes, so even knowledgeable foragers don't want to eat it because there's quite a few. It's a scaly cat family.
Right.
I found a wild one the other day, and it was exactly the same, but slightly lighter colour. But that's probably from being outdoors.
Is there a simpler name for it? What did you call it?
It's a scaly cap.
Scaly cat.
It's golden scaly cap, but golden scaly cap is actually a totally different one in the UK, but the Americans call it a chestnut mushroom, which makes it even more complicated. So I just call it Pholiota adiposa, or just adiposa. Yeah, do have a wander around when in a minute anyway.
Can I ask, is there certain like species, varieties of mushroom that you grow like in the summer versus the winter? Like are there ones that grow better?
Pink oyster and yellow oyster love the hot weather, so I grow loads of them. And then the grey oysters, there's summer strains which I grow more of. And the shiitake, this is a summer strain. There's winter strains as well, but I haven't quite got it right. I should have switched to the winter strains already because it's cooler. But the spawn I had wasn't ready, so learning, lots of learning.
How can the shiitakes in bags?
So
How can the shiitakes on in bags?
they got taken out. So I didn't leave any. Like I've got some in the fridge at the moment, so we have a look at those. So this is what I mean about the aborting. So that was mushroom growth. That was healthy, and then it put its energy into that, and so a lot of it just dies off as a limited amount. So many factors. Sometimes I can get the whole lot covered and it works fine. So I think air temperature. They really do. They really do. They're a very frustrating thing to grow because sometimes you can give them all the optimum conditions that the book says, and they'll just do what they feel like doing. They may sit there for a week and not do anything, and then when you think that the conditions are wrong, they'll decide, oh no, we'll grow after all.
So when you say a sterile environment, are we not polluting this and the doors open?
We are, but in the bags, before I cut the holes, it's sterile. I add in the mycelium in front of a big filter, which we'll go and have a look at all of that side of things. So there's nothing else. There's no other bacteria, even things off your skin, just like little skin flakes of skin bacteria. In a sterile, clean sawdust, it'll grow like mad. Everything. It's a perfect, nice, damp, warm environment. So anything that gets in there will grow, and I only want the spawn of the correct species to grow. So that is sort of has to be clean, and then once it's sealed, and the mycelium's all working in there, it has to stay clean. I did have issues with the filter, so this is a 0.5 micron filter, and that does let through some of this. Some of the trichoderma spores are smaller than this filter size, so I was getting an incubation room because it's not as clean as it needs to be. When you get the real pros, they've got a completely clean, sterile environment. You all put on your Clover to go into it, so there's nothing getting in there, so they can get away with bigger filters. They can even get away with even bigger filters than that one, more open filters. So I switched to a tighter filter. Most of the ones behind you are on that. Almost all the ones I've got are on the tighter filter, but all this is obviously an old trolley.
It's an example here, I think.
Ah, sweet, thank you. Yeah, this whole trolley will be. So this is 0.2 microns, so it's a lot smaller. Almost all trichoderma then is bigger, so the spores can't get into it, bacteria can't get into it, nothing that I don't want in there. So it allows moisture and airflow between the sort of natural environment and in here. So these guys produce masses of carbon dioxide when they are colonising, and it can escape, the excess can escape out of there. The fun bit is in the incubation room, which the carbon dioxide level is quite high. I spend a lot of time in there. I think it probably helps my lungs because I'm used to breathing a low carbon, high carbon dioxide, low oxygen environment, and I'm not died yet, which is great.
How long, you might have said this already, so if you have, how long does the whole process start from starting to make the substrate to everything?
Most recent. Some of these are dated the 2nd of September. So, what's that?
2 months.
2 months, less than that even, with some of them. I got some from October, which are around. So I think some of the ones I brought out are like 18th of October, which I'm bringing in next week. I put them in the cold store to give them a cold shock to encourage them to fruit. So sometimes it's only sort of 6 weeks. Other ones, like the shiitake, it's a minimum of 3 months, and for some strains it's 5 months upwards. And then other things, some of the grey oysters that I put in did nothing for the whole of summer, and then fruited now because the weather's better. So sometimes you've got an extra sort of 4 months, 5 months, just purely because the conditions are not sufficient. But yeah, the ideal for oysters, sterilise it, inoculate it, incubate it for 4 weeks, bring it out, put it in here, and then within a week it should be fruiting. That's the goal. The reality is slightly different.
And are you coming round and misting all these by hand?
So up there are two foggers. I've got a little preconditioning room up there. So when the humidity drops too low, they pump out loads. I was hoping that they'd just do something, but the conditions outside are absolutely perfect, so they're not firing up. It's amazing. You can't see anything once they've been doing their things. They're walking around. What's going on?
So I was just thinking, I've been putting loads of mushroom compost around a bit of the vineyard that needs a bit of. Isn't it got chicken poo in it as well, mixed in with that?
For the button mushrooms, it's animal based ones.
But you don't have that.
This is sawdust. I've got a huge pile up there, which is 3 years old, and it just takes so long. I think it takes about 5 years to break down.
What do you do with it all after? Is it good for can you put it on? Is it good for growing vegetables and stuff? No, not really.
It's a different pH. It messes with the pH a bit. My plan is to plant a load of trees up there and then just use this as a mulch around it, and it'll give it that lovely sort of humus level. Humus?
Humus is on your
Sorry. Something like that.
It does look like hummus in some patches. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, it's acidic.
But then that will be good for mushroom growth. So I'd like to try and do a few soil-based mushrooms, do a tiny bit of foraging, but finding things like chanterelles is hard work. Everyone who knows where they are and strips them. So my end goal is to do some of that.
They're kind of like a cheap, like quick thing almost. You just chuck the poo in and they grow quickly. Is that? They're kind of more delicate.
It breaks down and you get massive yields off of the button mushrooms compared with this. The sterilisation is done by the manure itself, so
the heat of it.
It generates enough heat that it kills off enough of the competing species of the bacteria. But because it's animal poo, there's a lot of issues I think with food around it. So I haven't gone down that route yet. I'd like to, because I get a lot of older customers who don't want to eat something like this. This is terrifying to them. It's not a button mushroom, so I'm missing even things like the shiitakes. They're weird. The thing is, what would I do with something like that? You chop it up and eat it.
I think until people have tried, because I haven't had that much exotic mushrooms. I've had a few, but I think until you're used to kind of like, oh, I've had a plate of whatever, then you can be like, oh, how do I cook that?
Yeah, totally. They're different texture. The oyster mushrooms taste very similar to button mushrooms, but they're a very different texture. And cooking with them is slightly different.
So what's the way you cook them then?
I always have it on toast. I'm very boring. I fry up mushrooms until they're slightly crispy.
In butter?
butter,
In butter?
Yeah.
Butter?
I use sesame oil. It's got a really high flash point.
Few herbs.
I bought loads of it at one point in my life, so I've got
Oysters
litres
and
of it.
stir fries and stuff.
But yeah, butter's good though. Butter's really good. Yeah, you get loads of butter in it. Just chuck it on some toast.
Do people ever use spent brewer's grain, like barley grain?
I'm assuming there's loads of people doing all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would if it's available.
Yeah. I guess if you get it in time, it's already sterilised.
Yeah. The big issue with coffee grounds is getting it soon enough.
Yeah.
Because it grows. It's full of loads of nutrient stills, and it grows green mold. We used to use some.
Yeah.
And if it sits there for an extra day, then you've got
Yeah.
a huge contaminant issue straight away.
Yeah.
But I know loads of people who are doing it.
Yeah, I've done it a few times. King oysters I did.
Okay, well done.
They were massive. Yeah.
Brilliant. King oysters is the one I really struggle with. I got some bags in the corner over there, still closed.
I put what is it on top? I just opened the top and I put vermiculite on top, and then they just grew out of that.
No, it's a bacterial problem that they suffer from. It's called blotch.
Right.
And they form like a rust over the surface of them. I'm not sure if it's a bacteria itself or if it's a physiological one to having this bacteria around them or other spores around them. And they just get this rust all over them, which makes them unsaleable, unfortunately, very edible.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm trying, there's a cross between king oyster and grey oyster, allegedly a cross. I don't think it's actually possible, but it's
Yeah.
marketed as a cross between them.
Right.
So I've got some which I started. I bought my first 3 bags out. They haven't done anything yet, unfortunately. They're just sitting over there. But I'll see how they do. If I can get away without growing king oysters, I'll be really happy.
Yeah.
They're a real blooming nuisance.
Yeah. Well, the head gardener doesn't know whether they're native or not, unfortunately.
That's all right. We'll sort you some native ones next time.
Yeah.
It's fine. Right. Anyway, do wander around here more at any point as well.
Cass, is this room something else before it was mushrooms? Is this room something else?
It's a kitchen. It's a kitchen. Yeah. It's not ideal for it. There's mold growing into it, so I need to. So I bring out really bags. That's the shiitake. Bring out a load of bags from the incubation room. Put them in here for the weekend, which triggers them to do their thing. It's like in the wild. It's winter. We get our first frosts, things like that, and it's time for fruiting at that point. It doesn't work with all of them. Things like the yellow oysters don't need it. Pink oysters because they're warm loving ones.
Yeah.
But a lot of the grey oysters, they really love having a bit of a cold shock before doing anything. You could also whack them as well.
I heard about that.
It's definitely
They do that in Japan, don't they?
yeah, and electric shocks as well. They got, it was like a lightning strike, so they got
Yeah.
stupidly powerful whatever they used to electrocute them, millions of volts, and they triggered them to fruit. Shiitake triggered logs to fruit as well, so it's really, I think, more useful with logs rather than these, because you can move these around easily. But you just like zap.
Dangerous.
Yeah.
Cattle prod. How that work?
It's not high enough voltage. I did properly research that. Yeah. I looked into it because I was like, maybe we could do that and just get. It's the second fruitings of things like shiitake that are really hard to do. I used to dunk them in a barrel of water overnight and let them soak that up, but then they just got contaminated with all sorts of other things that were just on the water, in the water. So I'd wind up with green blocks and maybe get a couple of extra mushrooms off of it. But if it can be cattle prodded, that would have been spot on. But no.
A friend in Australia takes their logs into a lake.
Yeah. It triggers.
Quite an interesting thing to
Yeah.
do, I think.
How do you get the trolleys over the...
I don't. I do it all by hand. It's not ideal at the moment. That door is going to be smashed out, and I put a sliding door in, and then I can move it. But it was used as a kitchen before, so I'm just repurposing everything at the moment, slowly, bit by bit. hence it's all a bit over the
You
place.
got to think so efficiently with skill that you're doing it.
Yeah, so I wind up moving, and they're 4 kilos each bag, so it's a lot of moving of stuff. Okay, right, so we'll head out that way. There's a couple of failures here, which you can see in the right light. You can see quite how green all that is. This one was done 19th of October, and within 7 days, all of that green had just grown. There's a few little tiny bits of white, which are the spawn. So that's the mushroom which should be in there, but so the green took over. That was
so it didn't have a hole in it yet?
No, this is how I incubate them. So it's sealed. After I've put the mycelium in, I seal it. So that was in there, mixed in with the grain that I put in, so the spawn that I put in. This trichoderma had colonised it, and then others where this one has been fruited, so that's been fully done, and it's sat there, and then the green just spreads throughout it. Internally, it's still okay. It could fruit as well. It's amazing that some of these that I throw out, they fruit.
Yeah, this one's.
Yeah, there's a beautiful one here as well. So that's just a sort of a second fruiting off of these. I picked them once.
Are these like out here for if they fruit, they fruit, and if they don't, they don't kind of thing?
This is me getting round to moving it elsewhere. At the moment we're chucking them in between the polytunnels just as a mulch to try and keep the weeds down a bit. Ideally in the future I'm going to put them around trees in the field, and it will just break down naturally. And yeah, have a dig there. Break. So you can see the mycelium is all spread throughout it. The little dots are the grain that I use to inoculate it. So I make some bags of grain. Here's a failure bag of grain. So the grain is soaked overnight, and then I cook it for 35 minutes and then drain it, and that gives the nice lot of moisture into it so that the fungi spores can grow, the mycelium can grow throughout it. But obviously when I was inoculating this one, it wasn't quite clean enough. A little bit of some spores got in there, and it turned blue for me. That barley. I use rye or wheat, depending on what I can get hold of. It's a real challenge at the moment getting hold of organic grains on the scale that I need it. So I tend to get them through Dove's Farm. Whenever they've got anything in stock, I buy like 5 25 kilo sacks of it, and that lasts me for like 3-4 months of doing lots and lots of different grain for the different species. I'll show you.
So those all did look like that, but they've congealed.
No, that one's grain, so that's the starter that I use. So that's a different aspect of the business. That's the second bit which happens. So I inoculate loads of grain, and then I use that grain to inoculate the other bags, and it's a good starter. There's loads of energy in there, so all the mycelium just grows out really fast in theory from that point. In one of these there are some little bits of grain that you can see, a tiny bit of white there. So that would be, if it wasn't competing against all this green mould, that would have spread throughout the whole thing.
And then you take that out and put it into one of these.
And then it's no.
Sorry.
No. Come and have a look. Do
you mind if I harvest this one, or is that?
Oh, go for it. Yeah.
Oh whoa, there's this whole bit that happened before that last sterile room.
So over here is grain, which I must just... Sorry, I'm just going to poke in the grain in the box before it over dries. So I cooked this grain up this morning, and it's now ready for bagging and sterilising, which I'll do later on. So I just put it in here, keep it the right moisture level. It's what my alarm was going off for about sort of 40 minutes ago, was to come in and do this. So anyway, it's not a total science because the weather is so variable. If it's dry air, this all dries a bit too quickly. If it's sunny, it dries too quickly, so I have to get it moved soon. So yeah, so it's put into a big tub, one of these tubs overnight. I put in 6.5 kilos of dry grain into one of these, fill it up with water, and then just leave it overnight soaking. 16 hours is the ideal. Over 24 hours, you run a risk of the mold, any mold spores which are on the grain when you bring it in, they germinate when it's soaking, and then there's a risk if it's in there for too long, it's an inhospitable climate, so they form endospores, which basically they harden, they change again, and then the hardening, if they're really hardened, then they can actually survive the sterilisation process. So there's a sort of sweet spot, ideally 16 hours. I don't know if this is actually fact, because there's so many conflicting reports, but I sort of try and err on the sort of 24 hours as a maximum for soaking it, and then I cook it, which kills off a lot of stuff, but also allows more moisture to be absorbed by them, and the fatter these are, the better they are for the growing mycelium on them. So it's trying to get them so that they're not too wet and they stick together in the bags, but so they're wet enough that they're fat and full of moisture. And then you'll see in a moment in there that I use some liquid mycelium to inoculate the bags after sterilising, inoculate the grain after sterilising. That then colonises over a 2-3 week period, and it's then, the grain is then added into the sawdust bags to start it. It gives it a good bit of energy so that the mycelium can colonise the sawdust quickly.
Who showed you how to do all of this at the start, or did you just kind of teach it yourself?
The internet's fantastic. The internet is really fantastic. There's guys in America who've been doing it for probably 15-20 years, and they're really generous with information. So Patrick from Upcycled Mushrooms started off and gave us some of the knowledge originally. But yeah, it's been learning, and a lot of it's trial and error. So much is trial and error. So I'm sort of slowly learning more and more. The time for cooking, it varies depending on how much you've got in there, how much water you're using, and what grain it is. So I think that a lot of people do slightly different methods to what I do. I do 35 minutes, but there's a certain amount, the same amount every time in the pan when it's cooking, and it's variable with the air temperature, how long I leave it to dry. Right. So over in the next door here is the fonder. I recommend masks because it just smells weird. I don't know, it's fine carbon dioxide, and there are spores going on in here. It's a little bit cramped. So I don't know how many people can cram in. So all the different. Oh, let's get some of these. And that's the liquid. That's the liquid mycelium, which is malt extract in water, and then sterilised. A bit of mushroom is dropped in, or a little piece off of a petri dish is dropped into this, and it forms this sort of brain-like substance. So all that is mycelium just growing in a liquid form. Makes it really easy to work with because I use a syringe and I can inoculate these grain very nice, which is all done in front of this thing here, which. That's noisy. It blows clean air over the workspace. It's a HEPA filter, so it doesn't let anything through which is going to cause a problem. The only issue is myself. When I'm wearing clothes, things like that, I wear a mask, I wear gloves, I don't worry too much unless I'm working with something sort of really quite important. I tend to wear another sort of overcoat or something like that and clean up a little bit more. But on the whole, it's pretty straightforward.
So is this the laminar
flow hood? Yeah. All the stuff is done in front of this. These are a load of blocks. So the ones outside there haven't been sterilised. These have been sterilised. They've been through my steriliser, which is 121 degrees for ideally a minimum of 30 minutes, which kills off everything inside them. So these are now a perfect host for anything. It's damp. There's a nice lot of moisture in there. In here, it's about 25 degrees. It's perfect temperature for things to grow. So ideally, I can get some of this grain in here before anything else gets in there. The sterilisation process, they seal quite well, a lot of them, or most of them anyway, so it's nothing can get in to it while it's sitting here waiting. But my lab space is cluttered, so ideally I'm going to build a new lab space out there. There's just so much going on in here, the dust, spores, dirt. It's a real it's a challenge, but it works. And up behind you is all the different types of grain, and then stuff is incubating over different stages of incubation. So you can see some of the ones at the second level there. They were only colonised last week. You can see the white is moving around.
White appearance then, is that like the mycelium?
Yeah,
the little, like a root.
Yeah, it's the white. The white is the mycelium moving around through the sawdust. So it's this is how I front it all up, and then in front of here, so cut that open, use a scoop, put a bit into each of these, seal it, mix it all up, and then it's ready for just sitting and waiting. In the room next door is the shiitake, which are various different stages, and they take a lot longer, whereas everything in here ideally is only sort of 3-4 weeks before I bring it out. Some of them aren't working quite well. The one right at the top there's a big naked gap where it's just not colonising for some reason. It could be bacteria in there fighting of some sort, or I don't know, just sometimes the sawdust is not to its liking, something weird. But on the whole, they work really well. They colonise fantastically.
You say you're buying in fuel logs?
Yeah. So I've got a big pile of them out there. It's pure beech.
And you came by that?
It's what the Americans do. They buy in fuel pellets. Almost all of the big guys use fuel pellets, and they're much easier to work with than the logs. Obviously, you just pour it into a big mixer, and it all rehydrates. Size of particles is an issue. The mycelium doesn't like dust size particles, so what I get is variable. Hence, it could be just that patch of that one. There's a lot of dust in it, which is inhibiting the mycelium growth. Or there could be some other.
It's a byproduct of a process, and there's nothing to motivate them for it to be pure beech, but it just is.
It's sold usually as sort of pizza briquettes rather than fuel briquettes when I go for it. So they're aiming it at a slightly more expensive market. But no, there is nothing guaranteeing that it is all beech, and there isn't bark mixed in with it. They could, just add a little bit of something. We had some Normandy ones, which are not as good as the previous ones I had. So there could be something mixed in there. They're maybe cutting corners. The colonisation, it was inhibiting the initial growth of the mycelium. So, I don't know. So I'm still trying to find a really, really good source, or trying to find a way of doing that side of it.
What makes beech the best wood to use?
It just is. It's almost all mushrooms will grow really, really well in it, except for the ones that prefer conifers. Right. It's easier for them to break down. Oak and chestnut, they contain a lot of tannins, which is a natural antifungal, and Then there's others which are slightly softer. They don't have as much nutrients. So beech is a very dense wood, so there's a lot more nutrients in there.
What about ash? Because obviously there's a lot of ash trees being taken down.
Yeah, ash works for some species and not others. I haven't trialled anything with ash yet, but from what I found on the internet, ash is it's good for things like yellow oyster, but not so good for a lot of the other ones. Yeah. And all the bags are sawdust that I get from next door, so I filter through all of that. There's lots of massive chunks in it, so it's a challenge.
Shall I shut this?
Yeah, go for it. And this so mix up everything just simply in that. I mix up wheat bran and the sawdust, and then bung it in bags. These ones are ready for going in the steriliser. This absolute beast here is the steriliser. You can sort of pasteurise, you can do other things just in barrels, not under pressure, but this one goes up to, it goes stupidly high pressure, but you get too high, then the temperature's too high and it melts the bags. So about 121 degrees is the optimum for killing mold spores, bacteria, just starting with a blank canvas. Picked it up.
So you put it in the bag?
In the bag. So it's, mix it up, stick it in the bag, fold it over, and then in here. Not sure quite what temperature it's at the moment.
How long?
It just heats it up.
This heats it up, but under pressure. So it's a massive pressure cooker. So the stuff in here is still about 70 degrees, I think.
And the bags are sealed?
The bags close themselves over. I don't seal them when I put them in. But the pressure seals them in there. So I just use a little bit of tape just to keep the flap down. Some of them I fold this way, and others just so I can get more in there. And it's just heats it up. Run it for about 10.5 hours every cycle. I did have a sensor which kept tabs of what the temperature was internally, but it died on me. So at some point I'll replace that. 10.5 hours in this sort of temperature is fine, and once it gets up to temperature, it barely uses any power at all. It costs me, I think, £5 every time I run it. Probably maximum £5 every time I run it. And with the beech ones, I can get 20 bags in, so it's a really good efficiency. We used to use, there's a stainless steel barrel hidden way in the back over there, which is how we first were sterilising, but it's not under pressure, so we get it to 100 degrees for 18 hours, and it's just you're running a little heater in the bottom, steam going through it, and it costs a lot of money. But it means you haven't got an expensive bit of kit. This brand new, it's about 17,000. Second hand working is about 3,000. I picked this up for. He was giving it away for free, but I bargained him up. So it cost me like £200, and then redoing the electrics, because the electrics had all been messed with, and just making sure all the safety features, because like a pressure cooker, it's boom. It's a massively dangerous thing.
But that saves a lot of energy by doing it this way.
Yeah, definitely. The barrel one, you have to scale up massively and have sort of almost a room that you're pumping steam through to sort of get the right efficiency. Otherwise, you're heating a lot of water and it's just escaping as steam. I let a lot of insulation just to keep it in and not allow much steam to escape. But once you start getting any pressure in it, it comes out anywhere.
Was that in they used that machine for before?
Canning. The canning process. It's a German thing from the 1990s, and they just do cans or jars where you sterilise it and then close it up. This sort of thing's used a lot in medical hospitals and things like that for sterilising equipment, but not usually this sort of size. So I was lucky to find one this size. But then you look at some of the big guys, and they've got ones as big as this building. They are wheeling trolleys into it. They just put 20 trolleys in, fire it up. 10 hours later, they wheel all the trolleys back out, all sterilised. Amazing stuff.
But that cost has gone up phenomenally for and on that scale.
Yeah. I mean, I don't need it. I'd like
Because the margins they would have been so small already for the big guys.
Yeah, definitely.
And now all of a sudden they're finding they haven't got any margins. And
So the prices that they have to sell at has gone up. So buying in the ready-made blocks, it's probably a minimum of £6 now to get hold of them. Whereas costs me, even buying in the briquettes, I'm looking at sort of £1 of substrate maximum, and then sterilising it. It's 20 pence, and then just my time doing stuff, and incubating it for potentially quite a long time. So it still costs money.
Oh, yeah.
And the bags themselves, the bags are 50 pence each.
Yeah.
That's a painful part, and that's going up. That can only go up.
Yeah.
They come from America. The dollar's gone up. I'm not looking forward to buying some more, but I get through quite a lot.
Yeah. You still got a burner, I see.
Do you want to buy a burner?
Well, maybe.
Okay.
Because I had the really big one with the
year or so. Yeah, it's insane. All the brown is spores. But I've not opened the door for about 4 months. I come in now and then and harvest some, and then close the door and leave it. Absolutely amazing. It's just been slowly breaking down. You look at how small some of these bags now are. There's almost nothing left in there at all. They started off great big bagfuls.
Incredible.
No. No, a year and a half, 2 years probably.
What are they called again?
Reishi. So this is one of the medicinal ones. Good for immune system, lots of other bits and bobs. But I don't want to have this anywhere near anything else because it's freaking disgusting.